when this got thrown in front of me, I was rather intrigued by the whole thing. There are many huge questions out there, one of which is, what is the secret to a long-lasting relationship? There are a multitude of options you could do, I guess, to trying to find the answer to that. This was definitely nowhere on my list. Mike and Alanna clear. A very good morning to the both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming into the studio early on a Wednesday. Merry Christmas as well.
Merry Christmas to you.
Thanks for having us, Phil.
The way of solving this question that you guys came up with is different. You climbed onto a motorcycle and sidecar and crossed the United States.
That's right. We actually drove top to bottom. We started in Alaska in June last year, and then we drove down to the bottom of Argentina, over 20,000 miles in...
So it's a bit more than just the United States.
Yeah, it's 16 countries in total, yeah.
And where did this idea come from? Because this is not your standard route to answering any particular question.
Yes, Mike, where did the idea come from?
Well, thanks for asking, Alanna. No, it was whilst we were in the process of getting married. We were looking around. Actually, it was John Lewis, I think it was, where it all began in the crockery department, where we decided that the crockery was a bit too expensive for our wedding guests, and we wanted something a bit more interesting for our wedding list. And we decided upon basically getting them to contribute to a long journey. And once we had worked that out, and once we realised we wanted to do a big adventure, we wanted to do an adventure about something, and that's when we came across the statistic that 50% of all marriages end in divorce in the UK. And since we were just about to get married, we wanted to know how could we find out which half of the population we were likely to be in.
I won't ask you yet whether you've discovered which half of that you're going to end up in. I know which half I would like to think you're going to end up in. Alanna, so what did you do? You just thought, right, well, we'll start at the top there and then we'll just go south.
Well, the idea was, so for me, I was a little less clinical than Mike. I was fed up a bit of hearing about divorce. So actually I thought it'd be really nice just to celebrate marriage. So we hunted out couples with interesting stories. So in whatever form they came in, whether or not that was long-term marriages. So, we interviewed couples with 50, 60 years of marriage, but also couples who did interesting things or who lived interesting lives. So in Alaska, we hunted out the Inuits, right through down to kind of, fishermen in Peru, a little bit of everybody along the way, Mennonites, fundamentalist Mormons, polygamists in Utah. So people who were living love in extraordinary and different ways and working out what their secrets were.
And are there particular themes that come up as you made your journey? Were there particular answers to the ultimate question that you discovered along the way?
I think in terms of the journey itself, there was certainly the obvious theme of God and the role of that in the Catholic countries of Latin America. But I think the curious thing about it was, despite the differences in culture and despite the kinds of people we met, there was often things that came back. Obviously there's, don't go to bed on an argument, and there's obviously things that along those lines. But what was fascinating was that regardless of where they were from, people were in agreement that there were these areas of commonality.
And, you mentioned there that you stopped off and you saw polygamists, say. And I suppose because relationships can be varying different forms, were you surprised by some of the answers you got when you spoke to somebody who was into polygamy, for example?
Absolutely. I think loads of our stereotypes got blown out of the water as we met people. So with the polygamists in Utah, you arrived expecting the man to be, well, I'm going to say it, a little bit creepy, and the women to be a little bit submissive.
Yeah.
And actually, we interviewed 5 different families, and one guy who was the same age as us, so kind of early 30s, with a couple of wives. And there was so much love, and it was all about the family, and we were moved to tears by them. And actually, I'd gone in all kind of women's rights and thought, flag bearing, thinking this is going to be terrible. And we came away with real love, with friends for life. So what was wonderful about it was every single couple had something interesting to say. We learnt different things. I think more than anything, going back to your earlier question, the cliches came out over and over again. They're cliches for a reason. Compromise is really important. Respect, trust, all of those things that bind a relationship together. But equally, every single couple had a different way of making them work. So we genuinely got something out of everybody in terms of the advice that we got along the way.
I don't like to dwell on the negative too often if I can help it, but did you come across anybody who thought, oh, no, that's not the way to do it?
I think there's only one occasion and I hope he's not listening to BBC Radio Oxford in Peru. But
You never know.
but there was one fella who was a polygamist, but not a Mormon fundamentalist. He was a tantric sort of tantric master, if you will, and he was living with his 7 wives, I think it was, in a kind of a commune outside of Lima, having been shunned by Lima society, and he was insistent on the idea that the man was the master and women were the slaves. So much so that he actually asked Alanna to get on one knee and kiss my foot if she loved me. Which,
Wow. Did you?
I didn't. I said, I'll do it if Mike does it first. At which point there was a collective intake, a sharp intake of breath by the 6 wives. And at which point he challenged me on Western marriage and how a marriage of equals can never work. And because if you're independent, you can always walk away from each other. Whereas his whole belief is that the man has to be a master and a woman has to submit as his slave. And it has to be a verbal contract which can never then be broken once uttered.
Goodness me.
So that's what I don't agree with. You know?
We had a bit of a fight after that, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, because it was, he wouldn't let Mike speak. He was putting me on the spot. I was the one that had to justify Western marriage. And I was saying, look, I've married my best friend. I've married somebody who, it's all about friendship, it's about laughter. And he just kept saying, but you can leave each other at any point. And I said, well, no, but we never would. We've chosen to be together and our love is strong enough to hold us together.
Now, you've obviously spent that concentrated time in each other's company, crossing continents. Have you come out of it stronger? Or roughly the same position you were before? Has it changed your relationship?
Absolutely. I think it'd be impossible to go through an experience like that without it affecting us. From one point of view, from learning and picking up all this advice from all the couples that we met, but from another point of view, just actually being on the road together and spending all that time, in campsites and shonky hovels in Colombia and places, you kind of have to end up, being much more attached to each other than I think you otherwise would be.
We've learnt a lot about blood sugar. I get angry when my blood sugar is
Really?
low.
Keep her fed with chocolates.
Absolutely.
That was exactly it. It was
Solution.
emergency kind of snack bars.
So the journey isn't over yet. Now you're going to do the UK, and you'll be setting off next week.
That's right. On Tuesday, we get back on the motorbike and sidecar in Aberdeen, believe it or not.
We should say it's a different motorbike and sidecar.
It is. It's exactly the same model. The Ural has got a Siberian heritage, so we're fortunately able to drive in the snow and the cold. But the sidecar has to be on the other side in this country because we're on the other side of the road.
Mike did originally discuss having me in the centre of the road. He thought that actually it'd be hilarious to use the American model.
Well, I wanted to know, actually, who drives the bike? Are you sticking to traditional roles here?
Unfortunately, yes, because Alanna failed her test
Gromit failed the test.
just before we set out for the Americas. Yeah.
The day before.
Yeah.
Because they just introduced the new test and I was in a car park in Enfield and I went too slowly through the speed test.
Alanna.
I know it's
See?
heartbreaking.
You're telling me that I said a bit more than that when I discovered I had to drive 20,000 miles on my own.
Well, I'm sure you had lots of advice and a map reader in the sidecar.
If
besides
only she was a map reader, Phil. Seriously.
Unfortunately, I'm not great on the difference between left and right,
Ah.
which in itself opens a number of
all in
marital
all,
scars.
I'm quite impressed that you're still together, all together. So you're going to be touring the UK. You're coming through Oxford as part of that tour and asking the same questions?
That's right. At the moment, we are planning to come through Oxford towards the end of January, and we are looking for couples who have they think they have the secret of lasting relationships, and if they can tell us, if anyone has any advice, if anyone has any good stories, or in fact know anyone who we could meet, then we'd love to hear from you.
Mitzi from Tame has sent in the advice that I was expecting. A good relationship is to be able to compromise and never go to bed on an argument.
Brilliant.
We've heard that.
great.
We actually had one from George outside, your
The producer.
who just said never play Monopoly more than twice a year. I think that's excellent.
Actually, that's very, very good argument. Well done, George. 10 out of 10 on that. Well, if anybody's interested then and want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
It's simply the website, which is www.goingthedistance.org.uk. Sorry? Goingthedistance.co.uk. The other one is our old one. Sorry. Goingthedistance.co.uk.
Brilliant stuff. OK, well, we'll follow your progress and probably catch up with you maybe when you're coming back through Oxford. And when you have the ultimate answer to the ultimate question, would you please report it back in? I'm sure there are a lot of people who would like to know. Mike and Alanna Clear, thank you so much for coming in.